So to launch our theme today, property investment and tax planning with a particular emphasis on reviewing property trust versus direct ownership, would you please give a warm welcome to Mr. Len Andrews.
Thank you, Kevin, and welcome everybody to a great celebration breakfast early, beginning of autumn, great time of the year, isn't it? This morning's seminar was really birthed just a few weeks ago when I sat and pondered how do we handle the large number of inquiries from long friends of the company who phone me and my staff, but so many get bottlenecked at my desk saying, what am I going to do? Do I sell? Do I buy? Do I hold cash? What's the answer, Lynn? What's the answer? And of course, as I looked through the weekend papers, you see all sorts of stories. And link that with every Wednesday I have lunch with Craig Need, quite a brilliant young man who understands finance, understands tax and understands property. You'll hear a lot about Craig shortly, and I thought friends of my company need to hear from Craig the sorts of things that I hear every Wednesday lunchtime. So we decided to put this seminar on, and it's my privilege to welcome you, and I hope that it's as rewarding for you as it has been for me in helping put it together. Choices. Life is full of choices. In getting started more formally, so that I don't have the proverbial waffle that my wife says accompanies older gentlemen, I'm going to try and stick to what you're going to see on the screen. And the starting point really is Need and Need, a third generation firm of chartered accountants. Len Andrews Real Estate, as restated, 40th anniversary next year. And a simple reality. During those long decades, both firms have experienced the highs and lows of economic cycles. We've seen booms and we've seen busts. We've seen gladness and we've seen sadness. And it's our desire as two firms today to share some of those observations. And I thought the word empower you was an appropriate term because knowledge is potential power. Of course, it only becomes power once you apply it. The combination of firms, Len Andrews Real Estate knows property intimately, and we will talk about property issues. Need and Need are taxation specialists, and so they will, of course, address their area of specialty. Having the type of governments that we have in the Western world today, we need to put some kind of a disclaimer, otherwise we may be sued. So we've put it in simple words. Neither party is giving financial advice as to the best way forward for you. If any part of this presentation has appeal, then you should seek further advice and not depend solely upon that which is presented at this seminar. Is that a sufficient disclaimer? They normally have a lawyer prepared so that it's harder to understand. This fellow and the graph was what really triggered this morning. Approximately 8 weeks ago, in the Weekend Australian, in the financial pages, there was a graph. One line going up and the other going down. And the article that accompanied the graph said that direct property, the owners of direct property were still enjoying profits. The owners of investments in real estate trusts were suffering badly from big losses. And that was the graph. Now, I didn't cut it out at the time, but I haven't accentuated it either. That was the graph that the writers put in. If you own property, manage it yourself with the assistance of somebody like Len Andrews Real Estate, you will, at this stage, as a sweeping statement, still be making profit. On the other hand, if you have a piece of paper, it may only be good for wallpaper. Our logo, this guy is facing the future. He's intelligent. He's actually made plans, which is more than many do. He's reviewing them. He has choices. Will his future investments go up or will they go down? And that's where we stand this morning. So choices. You may hold shares. Don't own any myself. You may have cash. You may have invested in property trusts. You may still. You may be involved in direct property. You own it. You manage it.
Retail. And a few older people in the room, like my age or a little bit older, would remember the old corner deli. And there's not too many of these left around the place anymore. But to the Lynn Andrews team at head office, that's our favourite lunchtime haunt. And they make very good hot dogs. A great little commercial property, but very restricted in its growth. Through to the modern day delicatessen, which you can buy your petrol and groceries from all at the same place nowadays. Another form of retail is the bulky goods industry as well. And some of these names will all be familiar to you, and they fall into the new homemaker centres. Commercial property, typically referred to with office buildings, office accommodation. That was a property that we've been dealing with on Unley Road. And then you've got the CBD high-rise buildings in Perry Street as well. Industrial buildings, and a particular guest of ours here this morning will probably have a smile on his face when he looks at that building. But that was a group of 7, there's only 3 there, little commercial warehouse factory units at Camden Park that we assisted in developing. And through to some of these new buildings, and some of you may not be aware of these ones, but this is the new Adelaide Airport redevelopment. And again, there's some fairly big names there, and some fairly great looking buildings as well. And they all fall into warehousing and industrial scene. If you're a commercial landlord, you can own commercial property in 2 ways. You can own it for your own personal use, to have your own business live in it, or you can be a commercial investor. And that's where we're going to be heading down that road for the next few minutes as a commercial investor. If you're a landlord, to complete the picture and to complete the relationships, you need a tenant. And without a tenant, the mortgage becomes very high. So we need to make sure that the properties that we're looking at are very attractive to tenants. So what do tenants look for? Number 1, location. If you've got a retail property, typically main road, that becomes a no-brainer. Exposure, where there's people. The showroom or the bulky good precincts fall into the retail. And so we've probably got passageways of 1.5 metres wide, which is poor use of space. We've got offices, which were bedrooms, probably 4.5 metres by 4.5 metres. Lovely executive offices, but we don't need executive offices in this style of accommodation. And bosses will only want to pay for the amount of space that's relative to the amount of bottoms that they can get on chairs behind desks. And so it's a very inefficient use of space. Limited rental growth, because again we've got limited opportunity for the size of the company to go in there. So we've got increased risk, so therefore limited capital growth. But what makes this one interesting is the flip side. In that, and a little bit like Dad was saying earlier on, about having some dirt underneath the building that you own. Whereas the improvements to this land is not going up in value well enough to keep us all satisfied, the land component continues to rise dramatically. And over the last 10 years, I've watched land on South Road in the western suburbs go from $100 a square metre to what I thought was amazing, $300 a square metre. It's sitting at the moment about $700 a square metre, but we've actually massaged a couple of deals through in the western suburbs at $1,000 a square metre. So whereas the building itself is probably actually not worth anything, but the land itself continues to rise in value. So if you are one of the people that are in here today owning one of these buildings, don't be too concerned that that your rent's not going too far, because your land's skyrocketing. In a nutshell, tenant requirements: location, parking, facilities, building appearance, age. You don't want an old building which is going to take a lot of maintenance, because the tenant has to wear the brunt of some of those maintenance costs. The services to the building and the zoning. Big question, how much do I pay for commercial investment? There's many ways you can value commercial property. I'll put 4 up there on the screen. Rate of return, capitalisation for net return, same thing, different title. The replacement value, the comparable value of a comparable asset, and then equal